there. Thank you so much for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whether you're watching us live or on the replay. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. I'm Annette Richmond, and host of the Smarter Career Moves LinkedIn Live broadcast. So, Jay, I'm so happy to have you here. I think I met you last year on Clubhouse, and then we kind of got to know each other on LinkedIn, and so I'm so excited for you to be joining me today. And so people who don't know you, I'm sure, a lot of people do, but for those who don't, tell us a little bit about who, kind of who you are and what you do.
First of all, Annette, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And yes, I can't believe, I was trying to think back if it was LinkedIn first, then Clubhouse, or Clubhouse and LinkedIn. And I'm thinking it was probably Clubhouse and then LinkedIn, I'm guessing. And that's the magic of this platform, is just these incredible connections. Thrilled to be here with you. Nothing but the most positive things from everyone about you when I mentioned that I'm going to be here today. So thank you for having me. And for starters, because I'm sure there are people who do not know me and are burning with curiosity on my name, it is Gehan Haridy-Ardanowski. And I do go by G, like the letter G for short. So it's not G, it's not G, it's just G. So yes, I'm thrilled to be here. And okay, what was the other part of the question?
Tell us a little bit about what what you do.
Absolutely. So over the past couple of years, which is a large part of why this discussion really means a lot to me today, but I was laid off from my direct full-time job as an HR director a couple of years ago. And since then, I have established my own LLC to take on, formally take on project work. It's called Golden Synergy Touch. And I have a traditional HR background, if you will. So pretty much anything but comp and benefits. I'm your gal. And I always share that, again, going back to strengths and weaknesses and balance in all things. Love recruitment, love so many aspects of HR, training, facilitating. And as of late, I've been working part-time on a project. It's actually going to be coming to an end shortly, but that's really why I'm stepping up my game right now, trying to take on additional work, hopefully in YouMap with this process. So I was just recently certified, and I know we're going to cover off on it, but very, very passionate about CliftonStrengths in general. I get so energized just by these types of discussions. So yeah, just a little bit of everything. But yes, if you were to ask me HR-wise, I'm very strong in recruitment, and in fact, just had 2 pings about that today. So we'll see.
That's great. And I just want to say hello to, we have so many people joining us, our good friend Jillian Whitney. So happy to have you here. And Yolanda, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Thank you for joining us. And Lori Knudsen, who I also know a little bit. I talked to her a little bit on Clubhouse. So great to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm very interested in the CliftonStrengths and this whole area. I think I mentioned to you years ago, I used to be certified for MBTI, and I really think the idea of people looking inward kind of and understanding themselves is really, really very interesting and important, and can empower them, I think, in a lot of different ways. And, I was not familiar with the strengths at all until I talked to people that I met on Clubhouse. I heard a lot about DISC and everything that's kind of popular with some resume writers. And so I'm eager to learn about this as well. So I'm it's great, it's a treat to just have you here, but I'm really interested to learn about the CliftonStrengths. So if you can tell me, tell us a little bit about that and why you feel so sort of energized and passionate about that as compared to other, assessments that are kind of out there, because there's a lot of them.
And that's the thing. And I know we were going back and forth a little bit on this topic of assessments. And just to be clear with the audience, I am not an expert on assessments. Interestingly enough, as an HR professional, I've been very limited in using them in different jobs, because what I have found is that certain employers who decide, okay, they want to run out and use an assessment, they're never really entirely clear as to what they're going to do with it. It's more of like, okay, let's use it to knock people out of a process.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And yeah, see, you shrugged. You get my point. And
Yep.
the interesting, fascinating part about strengths, which I'll get to how I actually came upon it shortly, but unlike other assessments, strengths really hones in on who you are and what you're amazing at, what your unique talents are. And it's based on what they call talent themes. So there's 34 of them, right? And basically it's facilitated through Gallup. So if you're familiar with Gallup surveys and index and Gallup.com, if anybody wants to dump a link into the chat, but if someone can route that, I didn't even think to do that. I apologize. But Gallup.com, I'm sure everyone's familiar to some degree with Gallup. CliftonStrengths is an assessment, and it's been around now, I want to say, gosh, maybe around 40 years or so. It's been out there for quite a while. I'm not sure of the length of time for other assessments, but actually Strengths has a lot of value to it in that, again, it's focusing more on the positives about yourself versus, okay, we're going to knock you out of a recruiting process. Again, as a recruiter, these are things that are very sensitive to me. You know, we want people to feel successful, right? So the great thing about CliftonStrengths is it's based on 34 talent themes. And here's an interesting stat, and I have to remember to say this correctly, but it's basically the odds are of one person having your top 5 in the same order as you are 1 in 33 million. It's a staggering statistic. So that is, it goes back to our uniqueness and how we each add so much value to our roles and to companies. And I think sometimes, especially when it comes to performance reviews, you know, we lose sight of that and we beat ourselves up over it. So.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I am, you know, actually quite happy to hear that it focuses on the positive. And I worked as a recruiter myself before I was a resume writer. I spent a couple of years as a recruiter, and, you know, the whole thing is really trying to look for reasons to weed people out, you know, not to bring them in. It's like, okay, we have, you know, 250 people here. You know, how do we cut that down? Who do we get rid of? And it is process of elimination. And I love the idea that the strengths does focus on the, you know, on the positives, because I think people can tend to feel that we're like, oh, well, you know, if this is my strength and this is my weakness, and, you know, for a lot of people, it's being an introvert. You know, I'm an introvert. I know a lot of other people who are on camera and out all the time, you know, but we need our downtime. And people, I think maybe, I don't know, even 15 years ago would think of that as kind of being a weakness. But, you know, there are strengths in that supposed weakness. And so, you know, so I love that. So talk a little bit about how this relates to YouMap, because, you know, I know there's pillars, right, and stuff about that. So give us a little tutorial.
I love it. Stuff like that kind of stuff. Yeah. You know what? And you nailed it, Annette, actually. So what is so amazing about strengths is that it is the foundation of the process that I've become involved with in recent months called YouMap. And YouMap is based on four fillers. Oh, I can't even talk today. Sorry, the coffee hasn't finished yet. The fillers. 4 pillars is what it is. So, and I'll give you all 4 of them. So the greatest work with YouMap is initially spent on the CliftonStrengths aspect. So it is 1 pillar, and you take your CliftonStrengths assessment. And then from there, you also go on to assess your skills, your values. And that 4th piece is basically how I'm wired, you know, what drives you, what motivates you. And unlike other assessments, so I'll just even compare, you know, the strengths alone versus the YouMap as a whole.
Okay.
Like the strengths, it's energizing in itself. And for years and years, I mean, mind you, until, you know, a year ago when I started learning more about it, and then ultimately became certified starting beginning of this year, when I first enrolled in the course, because of all this knowledge I'd had about strengths, I thought, well, how can I apply it? So it was great for years to know, hey, Gallup CliftonStrengths or CliftonStrengths is just phenomenal. And it's important that everybody knows what they're strong in, especially for people having those conversations and interviews. And you want your best shine to come out, right? It's a great way to answer that question, which I'm sure you can relate to, what are your greatest strengths? Of
Yeah,
course,
I
and
know.
then the weaknesses are where you can improve type thing. But the great part about YouMap is it connects the dots. It pieces all of that together and gives you, basically that energy at the end to be able to say, okay, now this makes sense. Especially when taking into account the fact that, for instance, you may be in a job and you're strong in it, but maybe there's part of what you're doing that just burns you out, or maybe you're in a role, or you're, starting to go down a different path and everything shifts for you and you're trying to figure out, well, why is that? YouMap helps with that. So it's a very high level explanation to it. But what's amazing is even just talking to people about it. And I should clarify, I don't get money for this or anything. I will tell you this, when I invested in my certification, unlike another certification I did, which I'm actually getting ready to write about shortly, I made a bad investment once on a certification. And I spent a lot of money. And for years, I had nothing, like I didn't do anything with it. It was on my resume. Didn't know why. I did it because I thought it was what I was supposed to do. With YouMap, it basically says, wait, gee, you should not even have had to go through that certification. I should have figured these things out sooner, and then I could have avoided that, could have avoided certain jobs, could have, avoided different, environments. So it's just, even if I never ever scored, one single client from this paying client, I made my money back. The ROI is incredible. And it gives you so much, good energy just knowing that you did the work. So you had said that, again, doing that inner work is important. This is a great tool to use to do it.
It really can help you. And I would think it would help through all stages of the career. And I understand what you mean about that. I remember when I went from working for, I was a writer, I was working for a magazine, and everything was like, go, go, go. Oh, it has to be done tomorrow. You're working on, the next month's episode, the next month's edition and the current edition at the same time, sometimes two or three. And everything is crazy. And I actually went from that to working in nonprofit, where I was told, there's nothing that can't be done tomorrow. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? I mean, it's just, not for me. But if you can understand, I mean, does it help you with things like that, being able to understand that this is not for me?
Absolutely, 1,000%. And you nailed it right there. Especially with the values piece. So, again, if you're not energized by being in an environment that's just like, okay, I'm forced to do this. I'm being pushed in a direction that doesn't feel right to me, to go into something where it's like, wait a minute, this is possible and I can feel better about it. That's what this is meant to help you, get yourself, aligned with. And it goes back to burnout skills too. So again, to repeat, so it's primarily based on the CliftonStrengths and components. Without getting into too many details, it's more like driver, passenger, fuel is what you'll hear a lot of in the YouMap process. So out of your top 5, those are the things that drive you. But then when you get to your skills and your values, going back to what you were just talking about, you're going from one environment to this. That's where that shift is. It's like, well, wait a minute, maybe, that's not part of what I would have valued in the first place. Or maybe that's not where my greatest skills were in the first place in terms of execution, what those drivers were, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, there are, there are a lot of things like that. Like many people who worked in corporate, I had a couple of not so great experiences, and one of them too. And I'm wondering if this, would help for someone like that is, I am one of those people, like when I go into a job and it was, I go in, what can we do better? What can be better? How can we improve things? But there are a lot of companies that are like that, and they're looking for innovation, and they're not worried if you make a mistake as long as you're looking for new things. And yet there are other companies that are kind of, this is always the way we've done it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Kind of like the doing the assessments because, oh, we always do the assessments, or asking that, what is your greatest strengths and weakness? Because that's what we always ask. And so can this sort of ferret out those kinds of things as well?
Absolutely. And, this is part of why also corporate teams engage in this process, because of the fact that, again, if you have someone, and I'll get to more of my own story in a few minutes, but, for instance, analytical comes at the very bottom for me. I am not an analytical person. So if you're giving me work, if I didn't know that and you're giving me work that every day I'm trying to process and I'm doing it, I can execute, but there's a really big disconnect. Maybe I'm not doing it well. Maybe I'm not energized. Well, maybe someone else on my team is better at that. And having those conversations, which I think is important with, your management, with your team members, and really making it a collaborative effort. And again, there are teams that do this exercise. They, embrace strengths and incorporate this, because again, the really important thing to remember about this is you want to bring out the best in people. And that's why it's not encouraged to download all of your 34 at first. You really want to focus on your top 5, because the emphasis should not be on trying to fix what's number 34. Quick example, this happened the other day. Someone reached out to me because I said, hey, I'm, somewhat in the, job market. I'm looking for projects. And this person mentioned, well, I have a payroll position. I have a payroll project. And immediately I could feel my body tense, because I'm not a payroll processor. I'm not a payroll supervisor. It's work I could do, but it's not my strong suit. And I immediately responded with, I don't think it's the right fit for me. And I knew that. Yes, I could use, the income. And yes, I could use that work and, that little, check off the box type thing. But knowing that that's not really where my heart was at, I'm not good at it, just like the analytical piece. Whereas if you gave me a recruitment project, even if I had to sit and, go through, 80 ways to do it, that would be more energizing to me. Whereas some people wouldn't touch recruiting with a 10-foot pole. And that I'm sure you can understand.
Well, no, I can. And, I enjoyed recruiting myself.
Yes.
What I did not like about it, and that's kind of, I've had a winding trail. A lot of it's been in the career field for the last 20 years, but is I didn't like being the middleman, where I'm working for the employer, but I have the candidate. And of course, you want to place the candidate, particularly if you're contingency, you want to help them, but you want to get paid, et cetera. And I didn't like that whole middleman situation. I'm much happier working one-on-one with clients, but, I hear what you're saying too. I remember, 2 decades ago when I had my first online business, and my husband, who was a techie, tried to teach me, this is before WordPress, when it was all HTML. And he tried to teach me HTML just so I could change, articles. And I was sitting at the computer literally crying, because I just couldn't do it as much as I wanted to. My brain just didn't work that way. But I love that whole idea of having teams. So do companies have you come in and like work with a team and figure out kind of like who is better, enjoys whatever, this or that, to form teams? Or
Absolutely. And there are coaches out there who do different things with YouMap. So, and just like even with Gallup Strengths alone, there are different coaches who do different things. So for example, with YouMap, there are people who specifically work with corporate. There are, coaches who specifically work with corporate. There are coaches who specifically are, working with people who need life coaching. There are people who work, and again, I actually fall into a couple of different categories right now. So back to the whole niche thing, I can easily help the corporate piece. I can easily help the job seekers. But the job seekers really need this, especially when you hear, and that I'm sure you can relate to this, just hearing this from people, when, you have candidates who just want to throw a bunch of things at the wall and see what sticks. I get it. We all need jobs. We all need a paycheck. I do. Yep. But at the end of the day, until you really do the hard work, deeper dive to understand exactly what it is you're going to be good at, you're not going to be effective in your role. And the great thing, in corporate, and again, too, this is where there's work involved. It's being confident enough in your strengths to be able to have those more difficult conversations. And by difficult, I mean just, being, just more upfront about the fact that if you're in a role that is, maybe for instance, if your role scope changes, like I was referencing earlier, or if you're just placed in the wrong role, it's not for you, it's having those conversations. and being vocal about it. Sometimes, the team can shift if that's an option. And every organization, is different with that. But again, the whole point of this is to bring out the best in each other, not sit and pick each other apart.
Yeah.
As happens a lot. And so that's why I really, again, and I'll get to my story later, but I really do love this for that reason, because it is meant to truly bring out the best in you. And again, that's why we don't encourage downloading all of them and trying to fix number 34, which for me is analytical, and I have no interest in fixing it. It's just not how I use the word. That's not how I'm wired. That's not how you work. It's exactly the same thing for me.
I love that. So you are more working with individuals who are either job seeking, or maybe someone who wants to advance in their career and develop better leadership skills. That's really more of the people that you work with.
Well, as of right now, so I am still newer to this process. So I'm still trying to determine exactly what my niche will be, or if there will be a niche. So I don't want to just discount anything at this particular point, because of the fact that I could do both. But I'm not sure if ultimately, like, the job seeker will be my target audience. And two, I learned in this process, and this is really, really slick for those parents who are out there, of kids. There are assessments, or this YouMap is available for kids. So there's different levels of the YouMap. So, hey, let's,
wow.
Let's, head them off, before things become an issue. And again, there are coaches, and if I can, may I drop a name, for example? I'd love to drop a name and use an example. So there are, I'll tell you right now, in particular, first of all, Kristen Sherry. Please go find her. She's an author. She's phenomenal. She created YouMap, I want to say about 4 years ago. So Kristen Sherry, for anyone in comments as part of YouMap or knows Kristen Sherry, please drop her link. She's sensational. She's one of those people who put this program together with the best of intentions, not a salesy bone in her body about it. She's just sensational. So there's Kristen Sherry, and then the three coaches I've been working with just over the past year or so, just getting to know, whether on Clubhouse or through here. You've got, Lila Smith of #SayThingsBetter. She's phenomenal. Michael Goldberg, who I met, he's a recruiter. He works with executives. He uses YouMap for corporate. He's here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then there's Lori Knudsen. And I want to single out Lori for 1 second, because she's one of those coaches who, if you were to go visit her content, she has a very specific niche, and she works very well with parents of the student, pool I was referencing earlier, getting them, I guess, ahead of the curve, if you will, to understand, work through their strengths, what they are going to potentially be good at, versus selecting majors and paying a lot of money and going away to school and not having a clue really what they want to do, how they're wired, and how they really want to be. And so had I done that process and worked with a Lori, if YouMap had been available years ago, it would save a lot of us to this day, a lot of time and energy. And you've got people who are, again, transitioning careers. They're going to solopreneur. They're, considering whatever they're considering right now. This YouMap process is applicable to so many different people, but overall strengths in general just gives you that motivation to say, okay, I now know why I'm not good at XYZ. I want to focus on these and make them even brighter.
I think that that's an excellent point. You are talking to someone who originally didn't finish the first semester of college, went after high school, didn't want to go, didn't know why I was there. I didn't even last one semester, and ended up going back later and doing all of my education while working full time, which is, kind of a tough gig. So I just want to, we have a question here from someone in the audience about the, how does YouMap apply to non-traditional, non-corporate careers?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. And I don't really know if I'm skilled well enough yet to answer that and give hey, this is what you're going to do with it and take it to the next level, to be truthful. I think a lot of it, again, it's once you at least learn about your strengths, you can apply that to different things. And there's the fourth pillar of it that actually says, okay, if you aren't necessarily, satisfied in one role, maybe you can consider other things. But I don't really know if that answers the question, but yeah, I mean, again, it's not just for, careers, it's just for your own understanding. And like I said, if nothing else, understand your strengths and what you're good at and what you're not good at. And especially for solopreneurs. One thing, for example, if you're not, working with a team and you can't necessarily, reshuffle, if you will, your team members around, maybe something where as a solopreneur, if you're finding that I don't want to say weaker, because I'm not a big fan of the whole weakness question. I think I mentioned that earlier, by the way. But if you are a solopreneur, for example, and you notice that you have nothing influential about you, and that happens, especially if you're selling your business, but you're struggling there, you're thinking, well, why is that? Well, YouMap actually can say, okay, here it's right in front of you. You may need to possibly consider outsourcing or getting some assistance on things that can help you do better. So again, a little bit of a long-winded, answer to the question. I'm not sure if I entirely answered it, but again, the most important piece of it is knowing your strengths first, and then the rest of it comes from there.
Yeah. Knowing yourself. And, the thing is too, that I hear a lot of people, and I'm sure you do too, looking for like that dream job. This is my dream job. And, I had my dream job. I always wanted to be a writer. I was a magazine writer. Well, you know what? I would have taken that job again today if, but there were a lot of parts of that job, like typing up labels to send product back after a photo shoot, that were not so dreamy. So, you have to see that there's different parts of that. But I really do. It is so important to kind of know yourself. And I think that in the last, I don't know how many years, maybe you'd have a better idea than I would, that there has been more focus on that, whether it's books or, trainings where people are trying to understand more about themselves. And it can help you in all different areas of your life, your personal as well as professional, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, again, there's a lot of people, especially over the past couple of years. I mean, again, when we were in lockdown and going through what we were going through, and you're laser focused on, okay, how can I better develop? And a lot of it has become, you can go to YouTube and teach yourself. You can do online tutorials, and you're really pushing in the direction that you want to go in, learning the things that you want to do. And I think that's important. And I think that's what the pandemic has taught us too. You find that, again, and I know that's a whole other discussion with regard to the workforce and transition and, going back to work and all that good stuff. But I think people are starting to understand. And again, this goes back to, your values and going to work for companies. And this reminds me of something that I just wanted to touch on based on something you said a minute ago. But, there's all of this talk out there, when you have this dream job or this dream idea in mind, well, what about your dream company, right? So again, of course, and I'll just use job seekers or transitioning or what have you, any way you want to look at it, but people who are instructed to, do the target companies, and I understand that there is value to that. I will use myself though as an example of thinking, okay, great. I think I want to work for this company, and I will, XYZ company. And I will tell you, I was so excited because XYZ company actually reached out to me. Gosh, I want to say now almost, 2 years ago. And I was very excited about it, that XYZ company reached out to me. And XYZ company put me through one of the worst, pre-hire processes, just the interviews. And it was so misaligned. But again, at that point, I hadn't done YouMap. What I didn't understand was that it really, again, as a recruiter, I took that context into it and thought, okay, this is how I would treat candidates. But then also beyond that, understanding the communication piece, which is a strong value, which again came out more and more in this YouMap process for me. I realized this is not going to work. So XYZ company, what would I want to do for XYZ company? So there's a lot of merit to that thought process. Just because you think you have a dream job, or you should, go into XYZ major and that's going to be everything. It's not. And plus you evolve over time. I can tell you, I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago when I graduated college. And that's why I place a lot of value on this process for people, again, adult transitioners, and of course for their children and, the pre-college, getting ready to go to college think long and hard about that before sending them away. So it's a lot of consideration.
No, it is so true. And it's true with the companies too. Right now, a lot of people are thinking of, fintech, because, oh, fintech is sexy and you want to work for those fintech companies. But the thing is that, maybe what you're doing is not so sexy at that company, or maybe what you want to do that's sexy, you can be doing at another company. I mean, when I worked in nonprofit myself, I mean, I was a vocational counselor. That's how I fell into the career field. But we had accountants working for this nonprofit, and they were accountants, but they wanted to work for a company that they felt reflected their values. And so the company, although they weren't working directly with individuals themselves, they were supporting it. And so maybe that's where that whole company thing comes in as well.
You know what? And that's actually that brings up something, because again, you nailed it. And I'm so glad that you're understanding where I'm trying to go with this, because I can't emphasize enough why this is so important, because that values piece is critical too. And, again, you could be working for the greatest company in the world, and you could, I did at one point, and so not so much that I'll just, if I can get to my quick, is it time for my quick example? And I tell.
Oh, please
okay.
share.
Okay. So here's what happened to me, just to give some context, and here's why. So you don't think I'm just coming from left field with, oh, hey, G ran out and got a YouMap certification. So very long story short, I'd mentioned early on in this conversation, I have a traditional HR background. I've done recruiting. I will be honest with you, even when I graduated college, I graduated with a human resources development degree, right? And you want to know how I came into that? Was because in college, I didn't have parents, by the way, who were coaching me along through the process. I didn't have a lot of guidance. I didn't have a guidance counselor just say, hey, what are your interests? And hey, you might want to consider, a training, because I loved to speak in front of people at the time, I think, or something along those lines. Like I love to speak and shine, and I loved, acting in theater and whatever it was. I mean, again, as a, early 20 something. And so I ended up getting an HRD degree, training and development. And then what happened was, when I graduated, the first job I took out of college was an HR management trainee position with a company called Cintas, which to this day, there's a great story there too. But it was completely opposite of what I'd gone to school to do. It was more the business side versus the training side. And so I learned my role from the ground up. But at the time, it was very transactional. And then I went into recruiting for another company, and then. So I just sort of slowly went through my career until I got to Pricewaterhouse, which was a job back in 2011. I took this job as a result of networking. Very blessed for it. Stayed in that role for 2 years, and I literally loved some of the people I worked with. Loved some of the things I did. I can never speak highly enough of PwC, which at the time, #1 accounting firm in the world. I think they're still, big four. I'm not sure of their status, but at the time it was just this big to do, and it was magic. Hey, I'm going to go work. But for 2 years, I spent my, every day in a role that was just misaligned with really where my strengths were. I didn't know that at the time. And I kept asking, okay, is there something else I can do? I'm crying for help, blah, blah. One day I was let go from my job. To this day, I don't know if I was fired, if it was mutual, blah, blah, blah. Long time ago. Then the day I left my job, I learned about ClifftonStrengths. 1 week later, I took the assessment, and I learned that my top 5 were, my woo positivity. I won't even get into that. But then shortly after that, I downloaded the rest of them. And analytical, which was the role that I was doing at Pricewaterhouse at the time, fell in at number 30 out of 34. It has since even plummeted. Now it's at the very bottom at 34. So I am not a financial analyst. I'm not a numbers person. Had I known that before I took the job, I probably would not have taken the job. But I was so blessed that networking got me to that place.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. I actually worked my way through college, bookkeeping and working at, I was a staff accountant at a CPA firm for a while. And, I was able to get the education and do that, but I hated it. I hated it so much. It was just, and so while that was something I was good at, it was not, I don't know, pleasing to me. It was not fulfilling to me. And so.
Exactly. And that's why I stayed in that, because again, which responsibility ultimately came in at the time at number 5, it's now number 1. So responsibility is part of what kept me there. I just wanted to keep doing good and being a part of my team and feeling valued. I didn't know that at the time, but that was part of what helped me stick it out. And because I was doing a good enough job, something kept me there. But then ultimately it changed. And now I know why. And so that's why I can quickly recognize what I'm good at and what I'm not good at.
No, that's great. So I just wanted, thank you, Maria. Maria shared that she transitioned careers about 3 years ago. It felt freedom for me, learning avenues of how to be an entrepreneur and still looking at a lot of areas. So, congratulations on that. I've changed careers several times myself. It sounds like you have too, G. So
Marie's fabulous, by the way. You want to talk networking on LinkedIn, talk about someone good to their network. Thank you for spotlighting her comment. Yeah. And I again, we're all evolving. I think at the end of the day, we all just want to feel valued and know our place and contribute.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. And it just seems to be so much about learning about yourself. And I am a huge advocate for that as well. That's part of a lot of the work that I do with my own clients, to make them really look back and, what did you like? What did you do? What did the impact, and really take a look at their careers. But so I want to ask you, because you just also mentioned that, you took the CliftonStrengths. Now, I know that there are a lot of assessments that you can take online. The strengths, I believe, is one of them. And so if someone is interested, should they just take something online? What it is the value of working, with a coach through that? And really what's really important is, how do they decide if they say, I really want to get into this. I don't want to just take the strengths finder myself. I want to work with a coach and really get deeply into it, which I'm assuming you get more deeply into it when you're working with a coach. How do they know who's good?
You know what? And that's an interesting question, Annette. I mean, again, I think for anything, it's going back to, there's a gajillion coaches in all things online. So for instance, if someone wants to work with a certified Gallup coach, I mean, Gallup is a very prominent name, right? So there's a difference between working with a Gallup coach and a YouMap coach.
Okay.
Or Gallup Strengths, I should say, or CliftonStrengths coach, Gallup certified. There's again, two completely different certification processes. So I don't know how much you want me to get into those weeds, but basically at a higher level, the strengths, the coaching process there through Gallup is different from what YouMap offers. YouMap really takes those strengths, but also connects the dots. And again, if there are any YouMap coaches and comments that want to add to this, please do. But at the end of the day, it's really piecing that together. And in terms of which coach you want to work with versus others, I mean, again, there's different ones. I mean, people might, for example, want to work with me. And again, I'm not pitching anything here, but okay, fine. I don't have the most experience. I don't have 30 years of Gallup coaching or anything like that, but I can speak firsthand to how strengths have offered me, what that's done for my life, my career as an HR professional, as a recruiter, what I've looked for, and how I'm piecing that into what work I provide and do with my coachees and will going forward. Again, I'm newer to this. Now, again, there's different coaches. Like I mentioned, Lori Kay specifically works with, again, the demographic of parents and college or going off to college teenagers. Whereas Michael Goldberg works with entrepreneurs and more corporate settings, from my understanding. And then there's Lila Smith, who has her own wealth. So everyone's different. You have to really just do the research, one versus the other.
So is it important then, I would say, to look for a certification? I mean, is that, like in my industry, there's a lot of different certifications that you can get. Some are harder to get than others. Some are more like, well, if I send my money in, I do a little bit of something, I get the certification. Others are more stringent. So I guess that's what I'm asking. Is the certification important?
For this, it is.
Okay.
To be able to coach on YouMap, it sure is. And going back to what I was saying earlier about certification, I mean, again, I paid $3,000 for a certification I never even used. Never heard from the president of the company afterwards, like, hey, do you need it? I mean, I believe it's removed from my LinkedIn profile. I removed it from my resume. I'm embarrassed about it, to be honest with you. And it's something I will, like I said, I'm going to write about, because this comes up sometimes in posts. People talk about, the value of a master's degree, the value of a certification. And now, mind you, ICF certification is what, 12 grand. I mean, it's, there's that label, but a lot of times too, what people keep saying is you don't have to have an ICF certification to coach. There are coaches who don't have certifications. There's a gajillion different discussions on this. There's there's different viewpoints, but for YouMap specifically, for us to do the work, yes, you want to work with a coach. We can help piece those together. But again, YouMap versus strengths alone, YouMap connects the four pillars, connects the
So
dots.
it's really much more of the deep dive.
Yes, exactly.
Kind of like if I wanted to maybe go online and take the CliftonStrengths, and then I say, oh, I want to go deeper. So I would go to someone like you and say, let's, I want to work with someone to do YouMap. And
absolutely,
that would sort of, give me a deeper dive. And, I have to say one thing, because you mentioned that, you don't have a lot of experience at it. And, I got my master's in psych, and it was, working for a lot of people who were going into counseling. And the thing is that, there may be people in different industries that have 20 years experience, but if they are not going through their own professional development, or if they're not staying up to date with what's new, then you may get a better result outcome from working with someone who hasn't been doing something for 20 years, because they are learning the new thing. So that's one thing that I always tell people when they're looking for people in my industry, is to find out what professional development they're doing for themselves.
If I can just speak briefly to the YouMap coaches process, okay, just so people really find this valuable. I have to tell you, and going back to what I was saying earlier about Kristen Sherry, who is phenomenal. We have monthly calls, actually, and you don't really get this with other certifications necessarily, but there's a lot of communication, new rollouts, new information. You're not required, I believe. And again, I don't know the Gallup process, but I do know from Gallup coaches I do know and work with and what have you. I know that they're required every 2 years to pay X number of dollars and go recertify and take the test again, or whatever they do. But I don't know what business tools come with the Gallup process or the, CliftonStrengths. I can't speak to that. Whereas I can tell you with YouMap, it's very robust. So you have coaches who not only love this, and like I said, I spent money on this. Even if I never, ever earned a dime from it, I earned everything back. My ROI on this is phenomenal. I'm blown away by what this has opened for me, and the opportunities to just speak on it and get other people energized too. And yes, we all want to make money, but my thing is, if I can get people excited, not just about learning their strengths and feeling better when they have conversations and feel more confident about it, I've done my job. That's what I'm here to do. So.
Okay. Well, I have a couple of questions we didn't get to, but that's fine. Maybe come back and we'll talk about some other things. But I do ask each of my guests when they leave me to give me a question for my next guest. And they don't know who it is. It's just a random question. And so the question that I have for you, and you can give me one when we go off air, is if you could go back in your career, what would you change?
I heard that recently on one of your lives, actually, and I thought, you know what, that's a really great question. And, I have to say, it's a really hard answer to give. I guess the only thing I would change was I wish something like this had been around before, I went to school and switched majors 3 times and decided on something that I thought was going to be great because someone suggested it. That's my, I don't want to say regret, but I wish this tool, something like this, had been available. Now, other than that, anything else in my career, I cannot tell you how blessed I am. Even though I was, again, in a role that I didn't understand and I didn't feel confident in, didn't know why at the time, I do now. And that never would have happened. I wouldn't be here today had I not gone through that experience in a financial analyst role. Again, people reach out to me for recruiting. Don't reach out to me for payroll, benefits, comp. No, this is me. That will be my hair at that point. No, I'm not wired that way. So
Everything
led me to where I am today, I guess is my point.
No, that's
so I hope
great.
I answered sufficiently.
So, you know, as we are winding down, is there anything that, you know, we kind of did not talk about that, you know, you think is important and you'd like to just, you know, add quickly?
I think just reiterating the significance of knowing your strengths, and especially, I don't know who's all going to catch this, but especially for job seekers or people who are in transition, even if you're, you know, later in your years and you're thinking, oh gosh, I don't know what I want to do next. If you haven't done strengths, start there. I highly encourage YouMap as the full, you know, full picture, if you will. It connects the dots on everything. But if nothing else, know your strengths and be able to feel confident in that instead of beating yourself up over what you feel are your weaknesses.
Okay, well, I love that. I love that. I think it's true that, you know, people beat themselves up. You know, we'll have that little voice in our head, and my little voice never says, "Oh, Annette, you are rocking it." It says, "What do you think you're doing?" Right? You know, just I don't get that from my inner voice. So, you know, and so people who are watching us now or on the replay, hearing it on the podcast, and they want to, you know, reach out to you, learn more about you, how should they do that?
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you asked. So definitely reach out to me to discuss this more. Of course, there's a little bit of an offering I can get into offline, but if you want to connect with me just to learn more about this, ask any questions, the best way to connect is either through my email, which is Gehan, Gehan @goldensynergytouch.com. It's my email. But if you do want to connect on LinkedIn, and here's the fun part, people, please do this. Send me a note in your invite, because I value communication, and that's a boundary for me. And when I get a bunch of generic invites, many times they go in the trash. I'm a stickler for this. I am not alone in my thinking. That's an entirely separate discussion. But if you're interested, go to any of my recent posts and communications. I did a live on this last week even about this. And, you know, again, send an invite request if you'd like, and just mention that you met me here and that you're interested in learning more about strengths and YouMap, and kind of go from there. So.
Oh, you know, absolutely. You know, I am one of those people. I hate that too. You know, the email, the connection with no information, or the one that says, "Oh, we have so many connections in common," and I click on their profile and we have no connections in common. You know, and then so you know, and then there's the connect and pitch, and that's a whole other ball game. So we don't want to get into that now. So thank you so much for everyone. We've had a lot of people here since the beginning. There's been a great conversation going in the chat. And so thank you so much for being here. We know you have a lot of things that you can be doing. For people that are watching on the replay, please do comment also, and we will be checking back. And so with that, I will say thanks, G, for coming today. It was a blast having you here. And everybody else, have a great rest of your day.